Today's Japanese slang term is Sonakatu. Now, if you've been paying any attention to Japanese media, you've probably seen discussion of this term, which ostensibly refers to oshikatsu-like activities by fans of the current and newest Prime Minister of Japan, Takaichi Sanae. So the sana comes from the first two syllables of her first name. This word is being discussed quite extensively throughout multiple media outlets, including multiple newspapers, as well as various news shows.
SNS を中心に広がりを見せるサナ活。若い世代はどう見ているのでしょうか?
And is often specifically linked to interest in various things that Takaichi uses or wears, such as this pen, which apparently has seen an increase in sales.
直近1週間の売り上げでお伝えしますと、ピンク色のジェットストリームの多色ボールペンが前週に対して 1.9 倍の売り上げになっております。
As well as like a bag she wore, although that's potentially less impressive because it's a luxury item and therefore who knows how much stock there was in the first place. So on paper then, this is a really simple term. Sonakatsu is activities, especially consumer-based activities, which are inspired by the clothing and other items that Takaichi uses. But is this term a real thing? If you go on the internet and look up Sonakatsu, a large amount of the discourse on it is not use of this term, but rather discourse around this term, including by people who say that they are happy to see support for Takaichi, as well as other people, as in this compilation here, who find the term kind of creepy and question whether or not it's true, noting, for instance, a lot of bot-like accounts using the term. Now, to be clear, Takaichi's popularity itself is kind of unquestionable. Recent polls have support for her cabinet at over 80%, which is like incredibly impressive. And obviously, as she hasn't done much to date, I think a lot of this is excitement over what is unquestionably a historic election, as she is the first female prime minister of Japan, consequent exhaustion with a slew of older male leaders, and general hope that she makes things better, because there's no question that Japan is dealing with a number of issues right now that need to be addressed. And it's also unquestionable that this popularity is linked directly to Takaichi, as support for the LDP, her political party, is not that high. Like in this recent poll, it's under 30%, and yes, that's almost 6 times more than any other political party, but it's over 10% less than no party at all, which is something to keep in mind when talking about Japanese political support, especially the recent rise of certain smaller parties. A large portion of Japanese individuals do not support a particular party, but it does seem like many of them are very excited about the potential of Takaichi. But the real question and the focus of this video is Sonakatsu itself a word that people are not only using, but more importantly, were using before the media started asserting that people were using it quite extensively? Because that sometimes happens. Indeed, on this channel, I've talked about, for instance, how futehoro won the Buzzword of the Year list last year, but had very little organic engagement at all before that, or even how kamikatsu was listed as a recent term in a newspaper, and I couldn't find anybody using it, despite that there were obviously people engaging in the longer form of coming out to katsudo. So yes, certainly, now that the media is talking about Sonakatsu, Sonakatsu is seeing use, as in this person who went out and bought the pen and calls it Sonakatsu. And obviously, there's only so much we can find out about youth language practices by using the various internet sources I use in this video. It may be very popular on like Line, right? And I would never know. And if you've watched my videos, I've made no secret of my politics. So yeah, I'm probably a bit biased myself, as I'm not a huge fan of Takaichi's policies, although I do obviously hope that she makes life better for people living in Japan. So as a result, let me be incredibly thorough here to show that I'm doing my work properly, as I trace the history of Sonakatsu throughout Japan. So while Takaichi is now currently prime minister, obviously she's been a politician well before that. So in theory, because she's had supporters throughout her career, she has won multiple elections, Sonakatsu could have happened, quite a long time ago, right? Well, the first uses of Sonakatsu really pick up in 2015, but these have nothing to do with Takaichi whatsoever. If you know your Japanese pop music, you probably already know what these uses are, because 2015 is the debut of the international pop band Twice, and one of the members is Japanese and named Sana, so the earliest big use of Sonakatsu was to refer to fan activities by supporters of Sana from Twice, and this use still continues today quite extensively. I say first big use though, because actually there are uses of Sonakatsu going back to 2014, which is a year earlier. And in context, I can't tell what these are, but they could be referring to another use of Sonakatsu, which absolutely does exist, which refers to fan activities for the historic Sanada clan, and specifically Sanada Yukimura, who allied with Tokugawa Ieyasu in the rise up to the Tokugawa shogunate at the beginning of the Edo period, fighting with him in the Battle of Sekigahara, as well as other important conflicts. Since this person here uses Sonakatsu to refer to reading a book about the Sanada clan, as well as watching then a drama which is based on the book, and this person here is going to Kagoshima as part of Sonakatsu, referencing a kind of silly song which imagines a world where Sanada Yukimura did not die in battle in Osaka, but rather ran off to Kagoshima with some other historical figures. And here's even a use from last year at a samurai-themed slot machine. I don't really know how to process this, and I imagine that Sanada Yukimura himself would be quite confused that this technically makes part of his legacy, but that is Sonakatsu. And since then, Sonakatsu has actually seen more and more use throughout the Japanese internet to refer to a lot of different things. For instance, Sonakatsu is used in the Pokemon fandom. For all you Pokemon fans out there, I'll let you have a guess on why, because there's a few possibilities. One is that the character known as Shana in English is known as Sana in Japanese, so it could be fandom from her, but it's not. The other is the Pokemon Pupitar is known as Sanagirasu in Japanese, so it could be for fans of that, but it's not. Instead, this is used by fans of Sanaito, so with a long bar there, which is the Japanese name of Gardevoir in English. So in these posts you're looking at now, Sonakatsu refers to buying cards, buying items, etc. that link you to that specific Pokemon. In addition, there's people that have used Sonakatsu, for instance, to refer to going to saunas. This is not super common, but does exist. And you may say, like, sauna's already a short word, but so is Sanada and so is Sanae. So there's nothing really weird there, right? And I'm not going to go through a full list, but anytime a video game has a character called Sana in it, somebody who likes that character will use Sonakatsu to refer to their Oshikatsu activities there. But what about Sonakatsu to refer to Takaichi? That's the point of this video, right? Well, within all this early use, as diverse as it was, there was no examples that I could find whatsoever referring to Takaichi at all. Indeed, using Sonakatsu and Takaichi together in the search function did not produce a single hit until 2022. And this is very, very interesting because from this time, the term seems to be used almost specifically by a single Twitter account. Normally, I censor the names of Twitter accounts that I show on this channel, but I tend to include the name when the Twitter account is quite large and quite active in kind of self-promotion. So I think it's okay to show this here. Because in 2022, Sonakatsu started being used by an account which is very highly dedicated to advocacy and support of Takaichi's candidature in a number of ways. This person calls themselves Domai Oji-san, and yes, I do see the profile picture and I am concerned. But they currently have over 60,000 followers and started to be a real big advocate of the use of the word Sonakatsu starting in October of 2022. And the reason why was actually an interaction with another supporter on a minor account. Basically, Domai Oji-san posted that they were very nostalgic for Takaichi's attempt at becoming head of the LDP, not the prime minister, just head of the party, in 2021, and got into a discussion with somebody else who also felt very emotional looking at those photos. As this discussion developed, the anonymous small account used the word Sonakatsu to refer to activities supporting Takaichi and their political endeavors. Domai Oji-san immediately picked up this term, showing how much they liked it, and began using it extensively throughout the rest of the year. As this account picked up more and more followers, more and more people noted them using it, and this phenomenon is something we've seen time and time again, just usually with kind of influencers rather than more political accounts. That said, checking from October until August or so of this year, if you're from the future, this video is in 2025, use of Sonakatsu was mainly focused on Domai Oji-san and two other smaller but still very, very active pro-Takaichi accounts. I couldn't find large general discourse or even pictures of people going out and doing Takaichi-based support on the street or anything like that. And backing it all up that this was rather minor is the fact that on Google Trends, there's basically no interest whatsoever in Sonakatsu, despite, as we've seen, a lot of different Sonakatsus out there, until late October and early November of this year, which is again when Takaichi became prime minister, and more importantly, when the media started reporting on this phenomenon. So to make the timeline here really explicit, Takaichi became prime minister on October 21st of 2025, and that's when she was seen with the pen. And again, to stress, yes, interest in this pen is unquestionably real because of Takaichi's popularity. Articles discussing Sonakatsu, though, started to appear on October, say, 25th, 26th or so, asserting that Sonakatsu was a thing, a term that was being used on social media, etc. But most of them don't really cite a source for this, with others, like this post here from something called Lassus, asserting that Grok says that the early use of this term was in October 5th of this year by women fans, but as we've seen, that's not the case. Sonakatsu referring to Takaichi dates back to 2022. It turns out that the lying robot lies. That's why I don't use it for data. So if these articles are telling the truth, though, that would mean that between October 21st and October 25th or so, we'd expect to see a large amount of discussion using the term Sonakatsu on social media, right? Well, between the 15th of October and the 22nd of October, so running up through the election and to her becoming PM officially, there are less than 10 hits using Sonakatsu and Takaichi's name. Between October 22nd and October 25th, there are 0, not even from the big accounts that really like using this term. And yeah, Twitter is just one website, so there you go. But if you go and look for Sonakatsu on TikTok, the top hits have one video with a huge amount of views, but that video is a ripped news video talking about Sonakatsu, and the rest of the videos in the top have less than a few hundred hits. Yeah, one of them, like the person's clearly using the pen, they're clearly doing Sonakatsu, but this is not what you see in the top hits for a very, very extremely viral term. With some of the more popular videos that just have only a few thousand, just being dances where people are clearly using the term to get eyes on their video rather than doing something that specifically relates to Takaichi. And from what I can see, looking up Sonakatsu on Twitter now after the election, after all this is happening, this video is being recorded in early November, I see a lot of discourse about Sonakatsu rather than people doing Sonakatsu, although there is, yes, some Sonakatsu that is clearly being done now that the term has been established. And also this Sonakatsu is quite different from the Sonakatsu that was being used organically before the news articles started talking about it, because in the past, Sonakatsu was activities supporting Takaichi's candidature, whereas now it's more referring to a consumerist activity based on the things that she wears and uses. So, to kind of wrap all this up, to kind of bring this to a conclusion, and yes, again, I am biased, but I hope I've showed you that I did my work here. And yes, there is a possibility that this term is being used just in speech and stuff. But as someone who has spent quite a lot of time looking at Japanese slang term use on the internet, and so has a pretty good sense of what it looks like when there's kind of natural increase of a term, I just don't see that. Now, this is not a video where I therefore go out and say that mass media is lying, but I do think there's been some sloppy journalism here. From what I can see, you have the fact that Takaichi is extremely popular. You have people paying attention to Takaichi's dress and the things that she uses. That's unquestionable. That's something, of course, that happens to a lot of politicians, but is especially pointed and marked and unfair when it comes to female politicians. There's no question about that. And then you have people looking for a way to grab people's attention when writing an article about these two absolutely real phenomena. And so what I think we're seeing here is something that has happened time and time again, not just in Japan, but around the world since the development of social media, wherein a news outlet looking to get attention finds one or two tweets by some smaller accounts or really, really dedicated accounts and represents it as something that's happening everywhere. Indeed, there's even a Japanese term for this kind of news reporting, which is Kotatsu kiji. I've talked about it before, which is a Kotatsu article, with the idea being that you can write the entire article from your Kotatsu, rather than going out and kind of doing investigative journalism. And I don't know which organization started using Sonakatsu to refer to the activities that, again, I think were real, but it seems like all the others jumped on that without kind of double checking things, leading us to the situation we're in today. For now, though, I do think Sonakatsu is going to see use because Takaichi is definitely in kind of a honeymoon period, and there's a lot of hope for her administration to do things well. And you know what? Yeah, she's stylish, she's fashionable. So as long as she remains popular, use of Sonakatsu to refer to activities supporting her or buying things that she uses will continue to exist. But honestly, regardless of Takaichi's popularity, regardless of her success, I think Sonakatsu is actually here to stay as a word. And the reason why is while the fates and popularity of politicians can go up and down, there's one thing that, as far as I can tell, will always stay popular in Japan, and that is twice.